what you going to do? I'm going home to university. I mean, I got my part set. I'm going to be a professional, but not a professional surfer. And he said, I'm going to be a pro surfer mate. I'm going to be a pro surfer mate. And, those words, it was like, that was my future. And here was my mate telling me what to do. And I went, I'm going with you, pal. And that's what we did. Is I went with him, and we had some great years together. But he lit the spark of my dream. And my new book, this little book, The Code, it's about young kids inspiring each other. And just like Rabbit said to me, I'm going to be a pro surfer mate, I was going back to be a lawyer or an accountant. And when he said that to me, I went, whoa, it inspired me, changed my life just by that statement. And that's what my new little book's about. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But that's, when kids get together, man, magic can happen.
Thank God. Well, when did you feel like I'm a pro surfer? Like, when did it hit? Like, when did it click? When you're just like, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing it almost, because it clearly hadn't really formed until, Fred Hemmings and Randy Rarick created the IPS. When did it really feel real to you?
It felt real when I competed. I won a big event in Hawaii in 1975. It was the biggest event in the world. And they gave me a check for $5,500, which was a fortune then. I mean, I'd never seen so much, $5,500. And the next day after the event, I flew over to the mainland. I flew over to Santa Cruz. I was meeting with Pat O'Neill about maybe getting him to give me some free wetsuits. And I walked into Bank of America, and I said, I'd like to cash this check. And they gave me $5,500 in $100 bills. I went, yeah, baby, I'm a pro.
Now, the 70s also were a time of like drug culture had really infused itself into surfing and surf culture too. During that time, why did you consciously choose to say no and stay clean? And was it hard with everyone? It seems like, to me at least, I wasn't really around then, but it seems like to me everyone was indulgent in some way. It seemed like it was quite prevalent everywhere.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of dope in surfing back then. It's very different now. I think, when you look at guys like Kelly Slater and Shane Dorian and these amazing young surfers who very focused, very clean. But I think surfing was sort of at the forefront of that whole drug culture lifestyle. It was just part of the kind of territory. Surfers were smuggling, surfers were dealing. There was a lot of dope. It just was dope, a lot of dope in surfing back then. And the first time I went to Hawaii by myself to try to make my mark on the North Shore, this family let me rent a room from them. And I talk about it in my new book. I talk about it in the very first chapter, in the very first line. It's a chapter called I Will Be Myself. And the kid who, it was a mom and dad and a kid who was my age, who was 19, same age as me. And this kid was red hot at pipeline. He was like, I was looking at this guy and going, this guy's going to be hard to beat. Really great surfer. And the parents rented a room for me downstairs from their main house. So I'd been staying there a couple of days, and I walked upstairs to see the young guy. And he's sitting at the foot of his bed, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. He's sitting at the foot of his bed, and he's got a piece of aluminium foil, and he's got a little pile of white powder and a lighter. He's got the lighter underneath and a silver straw. And he's just sucking up the fumes as I walk in. And I look at him, And he goes, hey, Shaun, you got to try this. All the guys at Pipeline are doing it. That's what he said to me. Shaun, you got to try this. All the guys at Pipeline are doing this. Now, like Pipeline, man, I had that poster of Pipeline above my bed for my whole youth. John Peck at Pipeline. I wanted to be one of those guys at Pipeline. And I just looked at this. Like, he's a young guy. I want to be friends. He's a cool dude. And all the guys at Pipeline are doing it. And I went, no, it's not for me. And it wasn't like I felt uncomfortable. I just it wasn't for me. And I walked away. And I left the house a few days later. I just didn't feel good, being in that sort of environment. And unfortunately, I heard 3 months later, the kid died and overdosed from heroin. So they called it Chasing the Dragon. Those are that's how I open my new book, Chasing the Dragon. That's what they call it, Chasing the Dragon, when kids smoke heroin. And now it's become a huge problem again on the West Coast. In the surfing community, young kids are chasing the dragon because it goes straight to the brain. But as parents, it's hard for our kids. And I wrote this book because I lost my boy. I wrote this book because he inspired me to write this book. And when I gave a talk at a school in Santa Barbara, I was speaking to kids about my first book, about Surfer's Code, and about the lessons that surfing has taught me about life. I asked them to write 12 promises to themselves as a homework assignment. And about 2 weeks later, the teacher sent me back the answers of the homework assignment from these kids. So I asked them to write, just like I wrote Surfer's Code, 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. I want you to make 12 promises to yourself about your future. Like, what are you going to do? Whatever you think, just write 12 lines. A simple exercise. And I'm actually trying to get this exercise put in every school in the country. It's not going to cost teachers anything. Just once a year, they write 12 lines. I will care. I will whatever. Whatever a kid wants to write. And the first answer I got back, and the hundreds and hundreds of replies I got, was I will be myself. That was what it was. And I knew when I saw that, I had to do something about it, because kids have so much thrown at them. Man, the life is dangerous for our kids. You have to be so careful, and they have to be so aware. And I think that mantra, if kids just get it, like, I'm not going to succumb to peer pressure. I'm just going to be myself. It's sort of like a chilled statement. It's like easy. I'll be myself. Thank you, but no thanks. It's not like I'm going to fight my way through this peer pressure. It's just like, I'll be myself. Simple. So I don't know where I got that from. I don't know where I got it. I got it from my mom, my dad. I don't know. I just had it. I just didn't want to go down that path of destruction. I think those words, for me, thinking about them now, man, I'm going to make this a mission of mine to get this concept out there into the youth community, and hopefully, man, if it can save one life, because 12,000 kids die every year in this country from preventable deaths. 12,000, 12 to 19. I call that the danger demo, because kids in that period have more chances of dying than at any other time in their life, whether it's suicide, whether it's drugs, whether it's car crashes. It's just a dangerous time. So I'm just hoping that maybe all of you, if you dig the message, you can get it out then. Maybe, a teacher, spoken to a couple of guys tonight that made teachers, is just get them once a year to get their kids, get their school to write the code. Get a kid to write their own code, and then share it with each other and inspire each other. And maybe magic can happen. Because like I said, when I stood there on the beach with rabbits, and he told me he was going to be a pro, man, it was magic, and it changed my life.
So, we don't have a whole lot of time left. I just want to maybe touch on one other topic and then go through, I do a questionnaire. And then, so can we get the next slide real quick? For those of you who don't know, this is Ricky Rasmussen, perhaps one of the greatest surfers ever to come out of New York. He passed away far too young. But this guy, I mean, Balaram's amazing, but this guy blew doors back in the 70s. He was doing stuff nobody was doing. And I didn't realize that Shaun had been a good friend of his, and there's really not a lot of information on him out here, and I thought it'd be a real treat for the New York audience here to, if you could share a couple stories of Ricky real quick.
So Ricky Rasmussen was a great friend of mine. Unfortunately, he was murdered a few years ago, and unfortunately got involved with drugs. It was a terrible thing. You can see I'm just so anti-drug. But when he was young, he was a good mate. So I first connected with Ricky in 1975. We were driving up to the Gold Coast from Sydney. He'd flown over to compete. And shortly before we drove up together, we were all competing in a pro contest together, which was the biggest contest in the world called the 2SM Cope Surfabout. And Ricky was in a heat. He was staying with me. And Ricky was in a heat with these legendary Australian surfers, Midget Farrelly. The older guys here will recognize names. Midget Farrelly, Nat Young, Peter Drew, and these are like iconic names in Australian surfing. And Mark Warren and Ricky on a heat together. And they all, I'm sitting on the beach watching, and they all just like surfing it out together. And I just see like Ricky walk out the water in the middle of the heat. He's walking out the water with his board under the arm. He's walking towards me, and I'm going, "Hey, Ricky, what's happening?" He says to me, "No, we all had a discussion in the water. The surf wasn't good. So collectively, we've all decided that if we all come in and stop surfing, they're going to have to rerun the heat when the surf's better. We made an agreement." So I'm going, "But Ricky, look at the guys." And he turns around, and they all just like surfing for points, Nat Young and Midget. And Ricky takes one look and goes, "But whoa," and he just starts crying. He was a very sensitive guy. I put my arm around him and go, "Oh, Ricky." He was a very sensitive guy. And then he came to visit my homeland. He came to South Africa in 1976, and we surfed Jeffreys Bay together. Just incredible surfing. And he was a very soulful guy, very artistic surfer, and it was just such a pleasure to know him.
Thank you for that. That was awesome. So I had a lot more questions. I was ready for 3 hours, But I do this thing. It's a questionnaire based off of the, Bernard Pivot's questionnaire and James Lipton's, except I've surfified it. I've tailored it a little bit too, based off of really obscure information. So some of you, this might be over your head. It might even be over his head. You may not remember. Pablo Cruz or Pat Benatar?
Pablo Cruz played the theme to this film called Freerider, which was a very famous theme. But I love both of them, man. Pat Benatar, she was a mean rocker.
Single fin, twin fin, or thruster?
No, I must say, I love them all. Today guys will generally just compete on one type of equipment. I mean, Kelly Slater has really opened everyone's minds that don't just ride the one board. And I was reading an interview with Kelly recently, and someone asked him a question. What inspired you to ride all this different equipment? I'm not meaning to pat myself on the back at all here, but he said, I was reading this old interview with Shaun Tomson, and he said, when it was small, he rode a twin fin. Is that Pinky Military at the back, my old mate? He said when it's small, he rode a twin fin. When it was mid-size, he rode a thruster, and when it was killer, he rode a single fin. He said, and it opened my eyes to, today we just ride one board. We just ride a single fin thruster, and we're all riding 5'11" by 18.5 by 2.25. I mean, that's pretty cool. I'll take that.
Do you still use your creative quick exit from tubes?
Yeah, so he's talking about a maneuver that in the Bay of Plenty where I grew up was this just long